Hi guys, it's Ade from Kiddies Droid, and in this video today, I'll be giving you a basic introduction to HTML and CSS. Okay, before we get started, for this course, we'll just be needing two basic tools, a code editor and a web browser. A code editor is basically an app used to write and edit code. So for this video, I'll be using a code editor called Sublime Text. You can feel free to use any other code editor of your choice. But if you are new to using code editors, I'll suggest you use Sublime Text with me for this course. Now that you have chosen the code editor of your choice, we're going to start by creating a new folder. And I'm going to name this folder Introduction to HTML and CSS. Now the next step is to open this folder we just created with our code editor. So if you are using the Sublime Text editor, this is the interface you get when you open it. Now there are two ways you can open your folder with Sublime Text. The first method is by going to the top left corner of your screen and clicking on the File tab there. So a new sub window should appear. On that sub window, just look for the Open Folder option there and click on it. So your Explorer is going to open up. Now your job here is to go look for that folder you created at the beginning. I created mine in my desktop. So when you see that folder, just click on it and select folder. So right now, if you see the folder successfully added into your Sublime Text. Now for the other way of adding a folder into your Sublime Text. So I'm going to remove the folder from this project just for the sake of explaining the other method. This method is relatively easy than the earlier one. Just drag the folder into your empty window and automatically it gets added. So now you know two ways of adding your folder to your code editor. Now that we are done with all that, let's create our first HTML file. So just right click on the folder and click on the new file option. Now go to the bottom right of your screen and click where you see the word plain text. Now you see a lot of words showing up, just click where you see HTML. We are just telling the code editor what language you are about to write in. Okay, now just write HTML and click on your tab key. Okay, so before I explain all these jargons you are seeing on your screen, let me first of all explain what HTML is. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is a standard markup language used for creating web pages. HTML is the foundation of the World Wide Web and it is used in conjunction with other technologies such as CSS and JavaScript. So to put in short, HTML is used to build websites. I'm sure by now you understand why a web browser is one of the tools we needed for this course. So now let's save this file we just created. So Ctrl S, and you can write the file name as index. Now most HTML files are called index because many web servers are configured to look for this file name by default. Okay, so let me explain the stuff you can see on my screen. So on my line 1, I have something written there and you can see doctype HTML. The doctype declaration is an instruction you give to the web browser about what version of HTML the page is written in. It tells the browser how to interpret the HTML markup, which affects how the content is rendered and how the page behaves. There have been 5 different versions of HTML and the latest version of HTML is called HTML5. So what the doctype HTML is just doing there is telling your browser that this is an HTML5 document. So the HTML element on my line 2 is the root element of an HTML page. It is used to indicate the starting of an HTML document. The head tag that follows contains meta information about the page. The title element which follows specifies a title for the HTML page. And the body element defines the document's body. So now I'll be showing you how to open your HTML file in your browser. Just right click anywhere on your code editor and click on the Open in Browser option there. It's as easy as that. So our browser has loaded but it's blank because it's not actually written anything in our code editor yet. So I'm going to be starting off with the title tag. If you remember earlier, I said the title tag is used to specify a title for the web page. So if you just go into the title tag and write a title of your choice. So yeah, I'll be putting Introduction to HTML and CSS. And when I go back to my browser and reload, you can see here where I have my title bar. Introduction to HTML and CSS is there now. So that's how you change the title of any web page you are on. You just change the value inside the title tag. So now let's ask ourselves, what is actually a tag? In HTML, a tag specifies how a portion of the content should be displayed on a web page. HTML tags are enclosed in angle brackets and consist of a tag name that indicates what type of elements they are. So here I'll be introducing some tags we call the heading tags in HTML, and this is one of them. We call it the H1 tag. Now a tag generally consists of three major parts: a starting tag, the ending tag, and the content within. Altogether, this is known as an HTML element. So now I'll be adding the other heading tags. We only have 6 of them and they range from H1 till H6. So save your work, go back to your browser and refresh the browser, and let's see what we have now. So the HTML tags or the heading tags formatted the text into different sizes. So the H1 tag defines the most important heading, while the H6 defines the least important. By default, headings are displayed in a larger font size than regular text. However, the primary purpose of headings is to provide a semantic structure to the content. So don't just use the H1 just because you want a very big text. You only use the H1 when you have like a main heading of a section or the main heading of a web page. Now let me show you guys some other tags I think you should know as well. So I'm starting off with the B tag, or also known as the bold tag. What this tag does is that whatever text you put into it, it just makes it bold. Now you might not actually be able to see the difference between the B tag and the other tags, but just know that that tag there is bold. So the next tag I'll be writing is the I tag, also known as the italics tag, the italicized tag. What this tag does is it just turns the text into italics, or also slant text. As you can see in my browser, the word italicized is slant now. So next I'll be adding the U tag, which is also known as the underline tag. From the name, this tag just adds an underline to whatever text you put inside of it. The next tag I'll be adding now is the break tag. This tag is used to insert new lines into our HTML document. Now this type of tag is called an empty tag because it does not have an ending tag. You can also call it a self-closing tag. So here in my browser, I use the break tag to insert a line break between the I tag and the U tag. Another tag I want us to know is a tag called the HR tag, or the horizontal row tag. It is also a self-closing tag because it doesn't also have an ending tag. The horizontal row is used to define a thematic break in your HTML page, and it is also used to separate content. Another tag I'll be adding is the paragraph tag, or the P tag. The paragraph tag always starts on a new line, and your browser always adds a white space, or you can call it a margin, before and after the paragraph tag. So I'll just add some little more tags, but the tags I'm about to add now, I won't really advise you to use them because they are outdated and CSS can actually do what they can all do. But it's just good practice to actually know that these tags exist. You can test them out and see what they do. Okay, right about now, I want to explain to us something we call nesting of tags in HTML. Nesting of tags just simply means placing one tag inside another tag. So here I'm going to be trying an example. I'm going to be nesting the underline tag inside my H1 tag. Okay, so before I open it in my browser, can you think of what the outcome of this would be? You can pause your screen now to think about it. Okay, if you thought about a text this big and still underlined at the same time, then you are right. What's happening here is that those two tags are actually affecting the content inside of them. The heading 1 tag and the underline tag are both affecting that text of this is heading 1. Now when it comes to nesting this kind of tags, it doesn't matter the way they are nested. In this kind of scenario, the underline tag can actually come before the heading 1 tag. The same result will still show up. Now that I've gone back to my browser and I've refreshed my page, I'll still get the same result back. Now note yourself, when it comes to nesting, you should not nest tags of the same functionality together. Now what I mean by that is you should not nest like your heading tags together. Don't next any of your heading tags inside each other because they both do the same thing. They affect the size of the content, of the text content. So imagine putting an H1 and an H2 together. Your browser will just pick the one closest to it. Alright, so now we're moving to another part of this course which I title as Styling with HTML. Now styling was supposed to begin in the CSS part of this course, but with HTML we can still do some little stylings. To style in HTML we will need to use something called the style attribute. So on the starting tag of my H1, I'm just going to write style and just press enter. Sublime Text already understands what I'm trying to do, so it will auto-complete it for me. In HTML, an attribute is a characteristic or a property that provides additional information about an element. Attributes are mainly used to modify the behavior or appearance of an HTML element. So using the style attribute, we'll be able to change the background color of a text, the color of a text, and so much more. So inside the quotes after the style, I'll just write background color and I'll put a valid color. Please try to follow the syntax. If you get the syntax wrong, this attribute is not going to work. So as you can see now, just with the style attribute, I just changed the background color of my H1 to red. So I'll try the same thing for my H2. I'll have to put the style attribute again and I'll put the background color. Background color here is called a property, and while the value I put after background color is called the property value. So blue here is going to be called a property value. As you can see now, just with the same method, I changed my H2 to a background color of blue. So let's try other properties now. In my HT, I'll give the style attribute again, but this time I'm going to be using the color property. The color property is just used to change the color of whatever text content is inside that tag. So I'm going to be using the color property. I'm going to give it a color of red. Always put a valid color. As I refresh now, my H3 has changed to color of red. So I'm going to try the same thing for my H4 now. I have to put the style attribute again. I'll put the color property and I'll put a valid color of blue. So there are still other properties apart from the background color property and the color property. So in my H5, I'm going to be adding the style attribute all over again. Then I'm going to be using the font family property. Font family property is just used to change the font of a text. If you look at my H5 closely, you will notice that the font family of that text have changed. If you try it also, you should see it. So right beside my font family property, I'm going to be adding another property. I'm doing this so you just know that you can add more than one property on a tag. You are not just limited to using one property. So I'm going to be using the font size property. Just from the name, this is just to change the size of the text, font size of the text. So as you can see, the font size just increases the size of the text. So for styling with HTML, I'm going to be just adding one more property, and that is the text align property. So as a value, I'm going to be putting in the center. So let's see the outcome now. As you can see, my text moved to the center. So that's text align of center. So let me try another value. I'll put in the right, text align right. So I'll save my work and I'm going to refresh. See my text now at the right. The reason why I'm not going to use left is because by default, the text is already at the left. Alright, now that we've learned about styling in HTML, I want to show us a little stuff called commenting. Okay, so this is how commenting works. You just write these characters in front and in the back of a tag. So anywhere it starts and stop, you've automatically commented that whole tag out. Now what does commenting mean? Now, whenever you comment anything out, your browser will automatically not display it. So let's see if my H6 will actually still show in my browser or not. So this my H6 at the right corner, so let me refresh and you can see it's gone. So what happened there is that my browser didn't actually render that tag because it was commented out. Now there's actually a shortcut for commenting out. You just put your cursor on the line and you press your Ctrl/. Now why do we comment out? Now there are actually good reasons why you should know how to comment out some of your work. Comments can actually serve as a great source of information. Like let's say someone is trying to read your code, you can actually put some comment and guide the person on how your code is written. Like now I'm just going to write in this my comment, I'm going to write these are heading tags. Now I'm sure anybody who's coming to read my code will understand that the tags that followed are actually heading tags. Now comments can actually also serve as reminders for the programmer who is actually writing this code. Like now I'm going to write here, don't forget to uncomment out my H6, so that when I come back next time I will remember that okay, my H6 is not supposed to be commented out. Alright, now that we've learned about styling with HTML, let's move into something we call links. Now what is a link? Links are found in many web pages and they allow users to click their way from page to page. So the tag we use to create links are your A tags. Your A tags are also called anchor tags. So this is how a link basically looks like, just an A tag, and that A tag has an attribute of href which comes with it by default. The href attribute there just indicates the link destination. That means whatever destination is there, whenever the user clicks on that link, it takes the user to that destination. While the link text is the only part that's going to be visible to the user. You can see where I'm writing that link text. That's the only part that's going to be visible to the user. As you can see on my browser, even though I wrote URL in the href, you can't see it on the browser. The only part you can see is where I wrote link text. So let's see how an anchor tag actually works. So I'm going to put a link inside the href now. So now on this link, I have a URL I put there. It says www.kiddiesjoy.org. And what this means is that whenever I click on link text, my browser takes me to that destination, that kiddiesjoy.org. Let's try it now. I've clicked on link text in my browser. As you can see, it worked fine. So the link I just created in my HTML is called an absolute URL. An absolute URL just refers to a link that has a full web address. Now what I mean by full web address is either https://www. That refers to a full web address. Now since this type of links take us out from our website, what about links that would enable us to move from one of our web page to another still in our own website? Those type of links are called relative URLs or relative links. Now for us to actually use a relative link, we'll actually need to create another HTML file. And I'm sure by now creating a new HTML file should not be difficult for us. So I'll just add another link to my work. Then now I'm about to create my HTML file. So I can use my Ctrl+N to create a new file. Then I change the language to HTML. I save my work. Ctrl+S. Now make sure you are saving in the right folder. I'm going to name this file index2. You can't use the same name anymore. Now save. The reason why it's relative because the two files are close to each other, so make sure you save them in the right folder. Now in my new file, my index2, I will just keep the title of my new HTML file my second page so I can be able to differentiate them. So back in my index page, I've given my href to be index2.html and I put a link text there, link to my second page. As you can see in my browser, when I clicked on the link text, it actually took me to my second page. You can see the title on the title bar up there. So that means that link is working correctly. So in general, absolute URLs take you out from your website, while relative URLs just take you between pages in your website. So now on my second page, which is my second file, I'm going to try and create a link that will actually take me back to my first page when I click on it. So in the href, I'll have just index.html, since that is the file name of my first page. So in the href index.html, and I'll just put link to my first page. So that's what the user is going to see, link to my first page. So once I refresh on my browser, you can see link to my first page. When I click on it, it takes me back to my first page. It's as easy as that. So the two links are working now. Okay, now I'm back on my first page. Now another attribute the anchor tag can take is called a target attribute. So one value you can put in this target attribute is underscore blank. Now I'm putting it on the second link, which is supposed to take me to my second page. So let's actually try this and see what happens. Once I refresh and I supposedly try to click on the link to my second page, if you notice what happened here, it created a new window, or you can see a new tab here. So when you give a link a target of underscore blank, it creates a new tab for the other page it is trying to open. So another usefulness of anchor tags is you can use an anchor tag to actually send emails. Now, so I'm creating this anchor tag, and the href I'll just write mail to, and I'll just put an example email to follow it. Now what the mail to is supposed to do there is it's supposed to open the default email application for your device. So now I've clicked on mine, so it just brought out an option. Now I don't have a default email application, so it just brought out apps that can work as email applications for me. Alright, now that we've learned how to use the anchor tags, let's move straight to the next part of this course, how to add images into our website. And for this part, we'll basically be needing an image. So I have an image on my desktop. I'll just drop it into the folder we created. So what you can do is just go get any image at all, then drop into the folder we created. So you should have 3 files there: your index, your index2, and the image you're about to add. Now once you are done with that, to be sure you've added it, you can just check over your sidebar. If your image is not showing there, then it's probably not in your folder. So make sure your image is showing at your sidebar to be sure you've added it to your work. Now that you have your image and you are sure that it's inside your folder, so the only tag you can use to actually add images is our image tag. So you just write your img and you tap it. By default, the src attribute will come with it. Now the src attribute there is just meaning for source, and it's asking you the file path to that image. So if you just put the name of the image straight and you save it and refresh in your browser, the image should actually show up. Now make sure the extension of that image is actually there. My image name was kd.png, so if yours is .jpg, you put it .jpg. Any extension your image is, you put it there. It's also part of the name. So on my browser, as you can see, my image has shown up. So my image is a very big image, and the browser tried to render the actual size there. That's why it's this big. If your image is small, then it will be small on your browser. Another attribute that should actually be added to your image is the alt attribute, alt. So also call it the alternate text attribute. Now I'll show you how this alternate text attribute works. So in my alternate text attribute, I'll just be putting in Kiddies Droid logo. I'm describing the image, so you just describe the image. Whatever your image is, you describe it in your alt attribute. Now I will need a scenario to actually explain this alt text here. Now let's imagine your file, which is your picture, was actually moved by mistake into a new folder, but still in your same intro to HTML folder. So let me do that now. So I'll enter into my folder, then I'll create a new folder. I will name it images, and I'll move my image file, my kd.png, into the images folder. Now when I try to switch back to my browser and I refresh, automatically the image can't be found anymore because the link is not correct. Now if you can see, there's a broken image icon you can see there. Whenever you see that icon, it just means that the link to your image is not correct. Now you see where I'm seeing Kiddies Droid logo. The text Kiddies Droid logo that you can see there is the result of the alt attribute. Now the alt attribute just shows up the text, probably when for like a scenario like this where the link to the image is not correct and the image cannot display it, or for people who actually have eye difficulties and use screen readers. So your screen readers will just read the text inside the alt attribute. That is why it is best practice to actually describe the image in your alt text. Now that we understand what the alt attribute actually does there, let's now fix our problem that we have here. The image is not still going to show up because it's inside a new folder. Now it's very easy. You just put the name of the folder in front of the image. So images/kd.png. You have to tell it to look for the folder before actually looking for the file. So when I refresh, I get my image back. I have corrected that link, then the alt text doesn't need to show anymore because the image is displayed. Note, images this large will actually take time to render on your browser, so it's advisable to use smaller images instead. Now, apart from the source and alt attributes, images can also take in other attributes like the width attribute. Now, we use this width attribute to actually control the width of the image. For something like my image now, it's too big. So in the width attribute, I put a width of 500 px. As you can see, my image has been adjusted to the width of 500 px. My browser automatically calculates the good height for it. Now, apart from the width attribute, you can also use another attribute called the height attribute. So for my height attribute, I'm just going to give it an height of 500 px also. Once I go back to my browser and refresh, you can see the image is a little bit distorted. Now, I advise in this kind of scenario never to give an image width and height at the same time. Just best to give it one because your browser automatically calculates the order for you. So if I'm giving it height of 500 px, the browser will look for a better width to give it, a better calculated width. Now it's possible for an image to also serve as a link. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut this image tag and now I'm going to create a link. So in this link I have here with me, I nested my image tag into it. So my image tag is inside my anchor tag. Now this link, once it's clicked on, it's supposed to take me to my index2.html page, which is the other HTML page we created. So let's see how this works. So when I go back to my browser, I refresh and I click on the image, you can see it goes to my second page. So the image is serving as a link now. So now we're going to be learning about lists in HTML. In HTML we have three types of lists. So I'm going to start with the unordered list. We use the UL tag. And inside the another list, I'll put in another tag. I call this the LI tag. A list is a way to display groups of related items structurally on your website. So inside my another list tag, I'm just going to put 3 LI tags. You can call this your list item tags. So when I go back to my browser and I refresh this, you can see those 3 list items showing up. Now what made those bullets, you see those circles around them, is because of I put them in an unordered list. The another list there is just telling my browser that whatever list item is going to be inside, you should just put the bullets there. So another list from the name is a list that is not arranged. That's why they have bullets holding them. Now the next type of list we have is the ordered list. This is just like the opposite of your unordered list. So in my OL tag, I'm going to put 3 different LI tags again, still the same format. The only thing that's changing is the tag holding the list items. So my OL tag, I'm going to put 3 different LI tags there, and I'm going to check this out in my browser now. So once I save my work and I refresh, you can see that now I have in another list. It is ordered. You see 1, 2, 3. So those are the 2 major lists we have in HTML. Now there's still one more list. We call it the description list. Now this is how you create your description list. So the DL tag is your description list, and inside that DL tag, I'm going to put another tag. I call this the description term. So description term then followed by a DD tag. The DD tag just describes the terms it comes before. So your DT tag, this is your description term tag, must always come before your DD tag. So I'm just going to add 2 more other description term tags. So the DT again followed by another DD tag. That DD there is just describing the term it came before. So DT before a DD, that's the format for a description list. The description term, then you describe it with a DD tag. So this is how a description list looks on the browser. So these are your 3 types of lists: the unordered list, the ordered list, and your description list tag. Now when it comes to attributes, the another list can actually take in an attribute called the type attribute. So this type attribute just modifies the bullets when you put it in another list. So I'm going to be trying square now. Square as the value. So once I refresh this in my browser, the bullet there will change to square. So you can use this type attribute to actually change the bullets or your bullet in another list. So I'm going to try circle now. Once I refresh my browser, I get circle. So this is type of circle. Now by default, your list items are disk. So me putting type of disk again, I get what was there before when we order. So by default, your li tags are actually type of disk. Now your ol tag can also use this same attribute of type, but it's not the same values it taking. Now I'm going to put capital A, and once I refresh in my browser, so yeah, we're going to see that it's also starting from A, your letters in your alphabet, but it's still ordered. So yeah, I'm changing the type to small letter A. I see now it changed to small letter, so it's still ordered because it's still using the letters in your alphabet. So I'm changing it to I get the Roman numerals but in small letter. And when I change the type to capital I will get your Roman numerals but in capital format. So those are the values you can put in the type attributes for your ordered list. Now going back to our unordered list, I'm going to move the type I added here. Now there's something we call nesting. I think we have talked about that at the beginning of this course. Nesting is when you insert one tag into another tag. Now here I'm going to be nesting my lists. It is possible to nest lists in HTML. So what I just did here is I copied the old list and I nested it into my previous list. So I put another list into another list. And I try to refresh this in my browser. You can see the result now. So automatically when you nest the list inside another list, the bullets changed. So you see now I have disk by default, then the next one changed to the circle. So it is possible to nest lists. Now that we've understood how to create a list in HTML, and there's something I want to briefly explain. Now here I'm going to just put an h1 tag, and I'm going to put a sentence inside. This is heading 1, and I'm putting another tag which is my h2 tag. I'm putting another sentence there which is this is heading 2. Now once I check this out in my browser, nicely, what do you notice here? Here now I have two tags but they're on different lines. Do you know why they're on different lines? Now before I explain that, let me add some other tags again. I'm going to add my bold tag, and I'm also going to add my underline tag, my u tag. So I'm just going to write underline inside. And once I save and I refresh this on my browser, I get the both of them but they are on the same line. Now let me just explain what is happening here. Now my first h1 and my h2 tags I put here are called block level elements. Block level elements always use a line for themselves, so they use a full line. Your browser automatically gives them the full width of the page to use and always put a margin around them. But my bold and underline tags are called inline level elements. Now inline level elements, the browser doesn't give them a full width to use. They only use the width that they need, and that's all. Inline level elements accommodate other inline level element tags. So if there was ever a situation where you need to actually separate those two inline elements, you just use your break tag. Your break tag just creates a new line. I'm sure we've used this break tag earlier in this course. So your break tag is a closed tag because it does not have a closing tag. So what the break tag does is just it creates a new line. So I've used the break tags to separate my bold and underline tag. Alright, now that we understand block level elements and inline level elements, let's move on to something called tables. Now when it comes to web development, a table is an element that is used to display data in rows and columns. So to create a table, you have to start with the table tag. So you are just telling your browser that you're about to create a table. Now in a table, I already tell you that a table displays data in rows and columns. So a table is actually built row by row. So we use the tr tag to create a row. The tr tag stands for table row. Now in this row, I'm going to insert some data items, but I won't just write them bare like that. I'm going to put them in a tag called the th tag. Now the th tag stands for table head. The th tag is typically used on the first row of a table to define a column heading. So my first th will be of name, second th gender, and my third th of age. These are just different headings on my table. So once I save this and I refresh this, I get name, gender and age on one row. Now I'm going to try and create another row again. So I'm going to start all over with the tr tag again. Then now instead of my table header tag, I'm going to use something called the table data tag, your td tag. Now same with the th tag. The td tag is also used to define a cell in a table. So in this row, I'm just going to be putting 3 different table data tags. So one is going to hold a name as John, the next td is going to hold male, and the next one is 18. So I can refresh in my browser, you can see the way it's arranged there now. So by default, the table is always arranged. So I'm just going to create another table row again, and just to add a little bit of information to just make my table bulky. So this td is going to hold a name because it's under the category for name. The next one is going to hold the gender, female, and the last td is going to hold an age. So when I save this and I refresh, I get it arranged there now. So this is a table. Now it doesn't still look like a table yet. So the next step is adding borders to a table. Now to add border to a table is not so hard. You just go to the table tag and you add an attribute of border. When your browser sees this border attribute, it understands that it should add a border to that table. So the value inside should just be 1. So this is a table now, a complete table that has a border and it has some information inside. Now we have another attribute you can add to your table tag, the width attribute. I'm going to put a width of 50%. So the width attribute just to increase the size of the table. So 50% just means half of my screen or half of the size of my browser. So take note here that we've used this width attribute before when we were talking about images. So the same attribute that works on table, your width attribute is still working on your images. So just know that some attributes are not just limited to some tags. Now on my screen, I have here with me an image which I got from somewhere. Now we're going to try and recreate this table here. So I'm going to start with the table tag, such as that, then a table row because I'm about to create a row. Now in that row, so for this table, I'll be using the td tag all around. So in my first row, I have :1 as the first value in the first cell. Then the next td will be :2. Then followed by my third td, and this will be :3. Now we are done with one row. So let me just quickly add the border to this table. So it's as easy as just going to my table tag and just writing border equals to 1. I've added the border already. So I refresh this on my browser, I got my first row, :1, :2, :3. Now for the next row, now if you look at this table does not actually look like a normal table. It has some minor anomalies, but don't worry, I'm going to explain how those came to be. Now on my second row, there are only if you look at this table, there are actually only 3 cells there. So the first one is row 1 cell 1, followed by my row 1 cell 2 and row 1 cell 3. So when I come to check this out on my browser, I get my 3 rows. Now don't worry about how the default table up there looks like. We're going to talk about that. So now I'm going to create my third row. Now my third row, there are only 2 values in my third row. So the 2 values, the first one is my row 2 cell 2 and my row 2 cell 3. Now mind you, because when creating a table like this, when you've used a cell already, advise not to use that cell anymore. That cell is already in another row. It can't be in 2 rows at the same time, even though it looks like yes, it's occupying 2 different rows at the same time. Just so that once you've written it on one table row, it can't be in the next one again. So once I refresh and check this out, you can see the both of them, even though yes, there's an empty space there. Don't worry, we'll talk about that. Now for my last row, there's only 1 cell in my last row, which is I'm going to put this in a td. So in this td, I'm going to have row 3 cell 1. So now I have inputted all the cells on this table. Now it's time to fix our table to look more like the picture above. Now let's go back to where we have row 1 cell 1. If you look at this cell carefully, it is occupying two rows at the same time. And what I can just do here is I will go back into my HTML, look for my row 101 and add an attribute called the row span attribute, and I put 2 there. So I'm telling it to use two rows at the same time. Once I refresh my browser, if that space is available, it will use it. So row 101 is now using two rows at the same time. Now what about row 301? It is using 3 colons at the same time. So once I go to my HTML and I just give it an attribute called the col span and I just put in 3, I'm forcing it to use 3 colons at the same time. So if that space is available, it will use that space you asked it to use. Now that you've understood how to create tables, so we're moving on to the last section of this HTML course, and this part is just going to be talking about how to create forms with HTML. Now, a form is like a section of a web page that allows users to input data, and that data can from there be submitted and used for various reasons. Now, to create a form is so very easy. You just start with the form tag. Your browser knows that you're about to create a form. Now in your form, I'm just going to introduce some new tags to us. So the label tag is going to come in. Now in my label tag, I'm just going to put in first name. So after my label tag, underneath my label tag, I'm going to be adding another tag called the input tag. Now no worries, soon we'll understand what these two tags do. Now once I save this and open in my browser, you can see how the two tags are actually showing up. So the rectangle you can see there on my browser is the input tag. It just allows the user to write in information. You can write stuff into the input tag. While my label tag just serves as a text element I associated with my input tag. What I mean here is I'm just trying to tell the person that the person should write his first name into the input tag. So that's what my label tag is doing there. So I've used my break tag to separate them into two different lines. Now I have copied and pasted them. I'm creating another label and another input tag. Now in this label tag, this one will be the last name. So the first one is asking for the person's first name and the next one is asking for the person's last name. So this is a form basically already because it's asking for information from the person. Now I'm going to now try and create the submit button for this form. Now still an input tag also, but the type will be of submit. The type attribute on that input tag will be of submit. And I'm also going to add another attribute called the value attribute. I'm just going to put submit inside of it again. So once I save this and I refresh, I get not the save. So once I save my HTML and I refresh on my browser, I get a button called the submit button now. So this is the button I'm supposed to click on to submit this form. Now we're not still done with this form yet. Now before I add more to this form, I just want to explain what the input tag is doing there. Generally, you see what the input tag is capable of. You can write stuff into the input tag. Now, based on what you are asking the user, there are different kinds of information you might want to collect from the person. But now, for this type of form, we're only going to be using the input type of text because you just want to collect text-based answers from the person. But there are other type of input tag that will also treat. So now, adding more to my form, I'm going to go into my label tag and add an attribute called the for attribute. And I'm just going to write f name inside my for attribute. Now with that, I'm going to go into my input tag and I'm going to add an attribute called the id attribute, and I'm going to put the same value I wrote in my for attribute called the f name attribute. Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to bind these two tags together. Now what I mean by binding is once I click on my label tag, automatically my input tag is going to become active. Now once I try that for the last name label, you see now it's just highlighting, nothing is happening to the input tag under it. Now I will try to bind my label tag for the last name and the input tag that flows together. So on the label tag for the last name, I'll give it for attribute and I'll put the L name for last name, and also in my input tag an ID, and I'll also put the same value there, L name. So once I go to my browser and I refresh and I click on the last name label, the input tag under it becomes active. That is what the for and ID attribute are used for. You use them to just bind tags together in your form. So now in my first input tag, I'm going to put the value of f name into the name attribute, and for my second input tag, I'm going to put the value of L name in my name attribute also. Now, why am I doing this? When it comes to submitting forms, the only two important attributes are your name attribute and your value attribute. Now, because of the type of input this we are using for this form, the type of text input, by default the value is whatever the user writes in the browser, but the name attribute has to be attached in your input tag. So without the name attribute and your value attribute, you are just submitting a useless form. Now, if you've reached here with me in this video, then I'm 100% sure that you are capable of actually using HTML on your own. So this course was an introduction to HTML and CSS. Now we are done with the HTML part of this course. So let me give us a basic and simple introduction to CSS. Now CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It is a language that is used to describe the visual appearance and formatting of a document written in a markup language like HTML. CSS allows web developers to separate presentation and layout of a web page from its content. Now with CSS, we can control various aspects of our web page like the color, the font size, spacing of the elements, positioning of the elements, and so on. So CSS is widely used in web development. It is supported by all modern web browsers. It is an essential tool for creating visually appealing and responsive websites. Now there are three ways you can actually include CSS into our HTML. The first one, we have actually done it in this course already, but I will just go over it again. Now if you remember at the beginning of this course, we did some little HTML stylings. I said styling with HTMLs. So let me just put this is heading 1. Now we thought of an attribute, and that attribute was the style attribute. Now this is actually a way of adding CSS into our HTML. Now once you look at it from the view of CSS, we call this inline CSS. Whenever you put a style on an element, on the line of an element, it's called inline CSS. So we do something like this. Now I can change the color of this tag. I'll just put in the color property and put in an actual color. So color red. Once I refresh, I get this is an heading in color red here. Now we are not new to inline CSS anymore. So moving on to the second way of actually adding CSS into our work, we call this the internal CSS. Now how to add internal CSS? You can just go into your head tag and you write this, your style tag. Now what this means is, if we want to just compile whatever we write inside this style tag here is all basically CSS. Now since we are putting all our styles into this place here, that means you have to actually know how to call the tags you want to style. So to style our tags is not so hard. Now I'm going to remove my inline CSS I put here. So over here, if I wanted to style my h1, I just write it. It's not so hard. I just write h1. Now what h1 here is called a selector. This is what I want to style h1. Now when you use internal styling is also called like you are generally styling your work. So even if I had two h1s in my work, like something like this, this is also heading 1. So two h1s are in my work now with no stylings at all. So once I do something like this, I am talking to these two h1s. I'm about to style these two h1 at the same time. So h1 here is called a selector. So the syntax, and after you put the selector, you just open this bracket. Now whatever styles you put in this bracket is going to affect my h1. So the only things you are supposed to put here are the styles relating to this selector here, which is my h1. So if I wanted to change the color, I could just write color as a property, then I put the value inside, color red. So when I save and I refresh, the both of them are going to be red. So other properties I can use, we've touched some properties already, something like background color. So background color of blue. So once I save this and I refresh, I get background color of blue. So I am styling the both of them at the same time using my internal CSS. So if I add another tag again, like let's say my h2, and just put the same things inside, sorry, wrong place. So you have this is heading 2. I'll save this. Now if I wanted to style heading 2 on my internal CSS, it's still the same process again. I just write h2 and I just put the styles I want to put. So I can just call this color yellow. I save this and I refresh. My h2 is now yellow. Another property I can try is our text align property. We've used it earlier in this course. So my text align property, I can try center. So when I save and I refresh, my h2 goes to the center. Now mind you, when you are using your internal and your inline CSS, always take note, like now in this h1 here, if I give this h1 a color, I have to use my style attribute here. So if I give it a color of, let's say, green, now I only give the first one the color of green. Once I refresh here, it changes to green. Now what happened here? It's not that it did not use this red, but there's something when it comes to styling. Stylings have priorities. They have priorities. So inline styling or your inline CSS has the highest priority. So that is why it changed the color of green. Not that the color red did not affect it, but because your browser saw an inline CSS here, it used it because it was the closest to it. So note that when you use your inline CSS, your browser will always take inline CSS over your internal CSS. Now that this is clear, I told you that we have 3 ways of actually adding CSS. So the first one was our inline CSS, the second one is your internal CSS, and the last one is our external CSS. Now external CSS by the name is something that is outside an external file. We have to create a new file. Now what I can just do is creating a new file. So Ctrl N, I'm going to change the language here to CSS, then save my work. Now make sure you are saving it in your folder. Most CSS files are called style. It doesn't mean you can't change it, but most of the files you see CSS are called style. So when I save this, I have my CSS style now. Now how to write in our CSS. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy, I'm going to just cut it out, what you wrote in our internal CSS, and I'm going to put it into my external CSS. So shift tab. So in our external CSS file, we don't need to put this style tag anymore because this file recognizes only CSS. If I put an HTML code here, it is going to be wrong. I can only put CSS here. So this is CSS syntax. What you are styling here is called the selector. This here is called property, and the value you put is called the property value. So each one here is a selector, color is a property, red is a property value. Same for this one also. Background color here is a property, blue here is property value. Now note, always end each line with a semicolon to terminate each of these statements, because without the semicolon it will be an error. Browser won't be able to calculate this way. So end each line with a semicolon. So once I save this and I save my HTML, now the reason why it did not work, the reason why it will not work is, yes, we have an external CSS file, but we've not actually linked it together. Our browser does not even know that we have this file with us. So how to link our external CSS file? So what I will just do here is, to link your external CSS file, you just use the link tag. So this is the link tag. Let me just remove this. So the link tag goes as this. So you just write link. So href here is just asking, href is just the same with your link. It's asking where this file is, where the destination for this file is. And if you look at our sidebar, style.css, that's the name of our file. So I just write style.css, and once I save my work and I refresh, the browser has seen those styles now. So this is just basically how you style in CSS. So I always advise to use your external CSS because it's way more faster and more convenient. You won't need to put all your code on one page. Your CSS will be separated, your HTML also be separated. Now that we understand how to style with CSS, now our selectors, that apart from just writing the name of the tags, there are actually other ways you can call tags and style them. So still using our external file. Now let's say another way you can actually style a tag is by giving it something called an ID. So an ID is like giving a tag another name. So now in this ID, I'm going to give it something like H, or I can call it heading. So I give it an ID of heading. So I'm going to remove the internal or the inline CSS I gave it earlier. So now my H1 has an ID of heading. So when I go back into my CSS and I want to style that H1, what I'll just do is I just put hash. When you give something an ID, to call it your CSS, you have to use this hash character. So hash heading, same brackets, still the same syntax. The only thing that is changing is the way I call the selector, but still the same syntax that follows. So hash heading, that same bracket. Let's say I want to change the color, so I can call this color blue. So I'm going to just remove all this I've added before. So the only thing I have here is an H1 that has an ID of heading, and here I've styled it, so hash heading color blue. So once I save here and I refresh, it's color blue. So you can give tags heading, you can give tags ID, and with those IDs you call those tags in your CSS and you just style them. Another way again we can style tags is giving them something called a class. So class is also another attribute. So class, when it comes to class, I can give this one, let's say something like yellow. So the name of this class here is yellow. Now how to style classes in CSS. So I'll go back into my external CSS file and I just put this period. So period and the name of the class I gave it. The name of the class was yellow. So period yellow. And I open and I give it like a color of yellow. Mind you, the value I put here and the name of the class don't matter. I just put it so that I'll remember what the class is actually doing. So class of yellow, to style a class you always start with a period. To style an ID you start with the hash. So color yellow, when I save this and I refresh, get color yellow. Now one thing you should take note is when you're using ID, it's advisable to use one ID per element. Now what do I mean by one ID per element? Now that I've named this heading, it's better not to use heading anywhere else. There are some reasons, but which I can't say now, but it's just better not to use heading anywhere else. But when it comes to classes can be used more than one time. It doesn't matter. I can go to my H2, I can still put the same class of yellow here again. So once I save and I go back to my browser, expect my H2 change to yellow. So not that when you use your heading anyways it won't still work, but advisable, just use your ID only once and that's all. When it comes to class, you can use it as much time as you want. Now this class attribute can also accommodate other values. Like let's say I put something like center now. So I put something called center here now. So once I go back into my CSS, I'm going to create a class of center. So dot center, and I put text align center. Now what this means is I put two classes on one tag, yellow and center. Now look at the properties inside the both of them. I have color of yellow and text align of center. So once I save this and I refresh, only this one moves to the center. Why? Because the class of center is on it. So what I just want you to understand here is the class attribute can take in more than one class. It's not limited to one class. But when it comes to your ID, it is just limited to one, and that's all. But the class can take in as much as possible. Just make sure you use your space keyword to separate them. Don't use your comma keyword to separate them. Use your space to separate them. So now that we understand that, now the same way we comment out in our HTML, like I told you, a shortcut for commenting out in HTML is just your Ctrl// and you comment out. So the same thing also applies to our CSS. But now the comment here looks different, but it still has the same meaning and every other thing. So Now CSS has two types of commenting. You can have your single line commenting. I just select that line and I control / comment it out, and also have our multi-line comment like this again. So this is a multi-line comment while this is a single line comment, even though yes they look alike, but these are two types of comments. So single line comment, and we have my multi-line comment. So now that you understand commenting, let's talk about colors in CSS. So let me just comment this out. Now, apart from your standard name of colors, there are actually other ways of adding colors in your CSS. Now, one way of adding color is something we call the RGB. It's a way of adding colors. R stands for red, G for green, and B for blue. Now, how to use RGB? Now, RGB in that bracket there is expecting 3 values from you. Now, the range of those 3 values starts from 0 and ends in 255. So, if I have something like this just means this is color black here. What I have here is black. So once I try to save this in my browser and I refresh, sorry, let me save this. So I refresh back, I get black, even though yes, by default it was black before. Now this just is 0 means absence of no color at all. So once I put 0 absence of red, 0 absence of green, and 0 absence of blue, I get black in return. Now to get other colors, now let's say I wanted red. What you can just do is I can make this first one 255. I told you the range is from 0 to 255. I make the rest 0. So what I did here is full red, because I want full presence of red, and the rest of them should be 0. So once I save this and I refresh, I get red here. So same way for any other color. If I wanted blue, I could just make this 0 and go to the value for blue, and I put 255 also. So once I save this and I refresh, I get blue as the color there. So with RGB, if you know how to manipulate your wheels with colors, you should be able to get any color at all, any shade of color. Just know that yes, you're adding to colors. Like let's say I added, now if you even wanted white, color white is also like an easy color to actually get here. If you just make everything 255, that is the full presence of all the colors, you get white. Absence of all the colors is black, full presence of all the colors is white. So it's the fact that this space is still there, because the words are still there, it's just that it's color white. It's matching my background, that's why you can see it. So this is how you get color. So this is just your RGB, one way of adding colors apart from the standard name of adding colors. Another way of adding color again is something we call the hexadecimal codes, or your hex codes. So I'm going to remove this. Now for your hex code, you always start with your hash. Now hex code, after you ask, it's expecting 6 values from you. Now the range of those values, for the numbers it can start from 0 to 9, and for your letters or your alphabet is from A to F. Now how this works, the first 2 values represent red, next 2 values represent green, next 2 values represent blue. So RGB, still the same process again. So once I refresh, I should get black back. If I wanted putting something like this down, what color do you think I'll get? I got F. Now the range is from 0 to 9, A to F. So F just means white. So once I save this and I refresh, I get white again, because this is the maximum for your hex code. 0 starts it, F ends it. So I'm going to save this. So if you just know how to manipulate your wheels with the characters, with the letters, you will get your color back. Okay, so for your hex code also, it's not limited to actually small letters or capital letters. When it comes to when you want to add a letter, small a or your capital A is still the same thing, so it will still accept it. So alright, another way of adding color, this one is so similar to your RGB. It's called the RGBA. Now what this just means is, yes, you already understand that this is for the red, the first 0 is for the red, the next 0 is for the green, this one is for the blue, and the last one is called your alpha. A is alpha. Alpha is just, if you understand meaning of the word opacity, how transparent something is. Now this is color black, 000 is black. Now let's try something. Now I'm going to put 0 here. So the range, my value of alpha here is 0. So once I refresh here, I get white. Now what happened there? The range of alpha starts from 0 and ends in 1. So that means this thing can take in decimal. Once your alpha is 0, that means you can clearly see through it. It is see-through, it is transparent at that point. If you wanted it to be solid, you can just make it 1. So 1 is going to be my solid black. I get my solid black back. Let's say I wanted something made transparent. I could put 0.5. So once I save this and I refresh, you notice it's made transparent. It's kind of gray. It's like I can see through it. So that is what the work of alpha is doing there. So even though I get like my color red, if I wanted my red, I'll just change the first one to 255. So this is going to be red, yes, but because of alpha, it's going to seem a little bit transparent. Once I save it and I refresh, I get red, but this red here is kind of transparent. So that is the work of alpha here. Alright, so since where we've reached today, by now you should be able to understand and fully be able to write your own HTML code and at least do a little bit of CSS. So what we've learned in our CSS here is how to link our CSS. I already showed you and told you the methods, the 3 ways you can add CSS into your work: your inline CSS, your internal CSS, and your external CSS. So I just basically showed you how to start with CSS. Now your job here is just find other properties of CSS. These are just basic properties for CSS. The color, the text align, the width, all those ones you've been using are just your basic properties for CSS. What you can just do, you can research and get other properties and find out how those properties work. So we've reached the end of this video for today. If you have any question, any opinions at all, you can feel free to just put them down in the comments. So thank you for your time.